And that's, I think, the more common one that we all know about. But the secondary meaning was the power of enduring. And I sat with that for a while because I was really trying to think, what do I want to talk about in a different manner than just the rigor, the drive, all of the things that we often associate with health, with our work, with our lives, and whatever. So I was thinking to myself, like, where does our strength come from? Where does that endurance come from when we get bad news? When we lose a job, when we get a bad diagnosis, when we lose a child or a parent, a spouse? Where does that endurance come from inside of us? In all honesty, if anyone has a good answer, you can shout it out. I was really thinking about that. Like, what is that in us?
Grace.
Grace. Anybody else?
Only good can come from this.
Good. I like that. So I was thinking about that and how we can actually apply those things in the little things. Because I almost think that sometimes when the big, huge things come rolling down the avalanche hill and knock us down, we sometimes tend to do a little bit better. Like, we somehow get up every day, we take a shower, we get dressed, we go to our job, we go through our life and through the motions, even though these huge, terrible things seemingly have happened to us. But sometimes we're in traffic and someone cuts us off and we're screaming and yelling at the person, like, how dare you cut me off? And we're not going into that place of how can I endure this without, losing my mind, without losing my attitude. So I really thought about that a lot. And I thought about how we can always access that inside of us. We're always connected to it. Because just like Raymond Charles says, we're part of that divinity inside of us. That light of God, the creation of God, is within each of us. So we forget sometimes that we have access to that. And I want us to just sit with that for a few moments and just think about the ways in our lives in which we don't necessarily access that, in which we let our egos or let our, minds get the best of us. I've been listening to Brene Brown lately. It's like a 2-day, I guess it was like a seminar that she did, and they recorded it, and so you could buy the recording of it. And she talks a lot about blaming people, and I was like, oh my God, I'm this person. Like, she's like, I'm the one who's like at a party and I like spilled red wine on someone's carpet. And you go like one of two things. You're like, do you go own up to it? No one saw. Do I own up to it? Or two, do I go like, I just walk away. No one will see, no one knows. Or the third one, she goes, and this is what I did. I go, who in the hell gets white carpet and then serves red wine? Who does that? And I was listening. I literally paused the thing and I was like, oh my God, that is me. Like, I do. Like, who would park in a parking space like this? So Doris and I have been making a joke out of that. We've been trying to blow it out of proportion so that I'm catching myself, so we'll just see who walks down the street pulling a bag behind them. That's how ridiculous it is. So I've been doing that a lot lately and just trying to catch myself in those moments where I'm looking for something outside of myself to put the blame on so that I kind of feel better about what's going on inside of me. So I had this quote I found. A vital person is someone whose aliveness and spirit are expressed not only in personal productivity and activity. Such individuals often infectiously energize those with whom they come into contact with. This is from a book called Character, Strength, and Virtues. So I also thought about that, how our vitality and who we are, our character comes out. And that influences other people. When people see us and how we're behaving, if I'm the guy yelling, blaming, you have this white carpet, it's your fault I spilled the wine, that's encouraging people to come around me who have that same energy, that also want to look for things to blame outside of themselves. So I think there's a mindfulness in our heart and in our presence, like, who am I out in the world? I've spent my whole life going to church, or most of my life going to church of some kind or another. And I knew a lot of people who on Sunday, we're going to put on this show, and we all get dressed up in our nice clothes, and we talk about nice things, and we talk about loving our neighbor and all of these things. And then we walk out the door, and Monday morning, we don't do that anymore. And we all fall victim to that. None of us are really good at that. And so I think that's something about vitality and about our energy that we put out into the world. There's this other great quote by Jill Bolte Taylor, who was a neuroscientist who had a stroke, and she was a brain scientist, and so she knew she was having a stroke. When she had the stroke, she got into the hospital, they were able to help her, and she's fully recovered. But one of the things that she said in her hospital room when she was unable to communicate and she couldn't say anything, she drew up a note that says, "Please be responsible for the energy you bring to the room." Because everyone who came in, if the nurses were just, "Oh my God, this is so terrible, like what is she gonna recover?" It's like, she's like, "I'm wide awake." But I can't speak, I can't communicate that to you. And so how often are we aware of the energy that we are bringing out into the world? I know for me, that's one of my biggest jobs. That's my biggest work probably, is to be aware and to have consciousness around that. I got this other great little blurb from this new book. It's called "Everything is Here to Help You" by Matt Kahn. He said, "In order for a spiritual journey to offer the most rewarding experiences, the question remains, is it being explored from the ego or from the soul's perspective? If one pursues spiritual growth from the standpoint of ego, they are bound to remain in ego, no matter how much inner work they complete. If one learns how to evolve from the soul's perspective, more vivid experiences of life can occur. Since the soul is a conscious expression of source energy, it resonates with a depth of clarity that is as harmonious, inclusive, and kind as it is direct, effective, and potent." So that's the question for all of us. Out in the world, how are we exploring this place? Are we exploring it from our ego, which is the blame of the red wine on the carpet, or the guy who stole my parking space, or all of those things? Or are we exploring it from our soul's perspective? I actually wanted to do a podcast this week, and I didn't get around to it, but the title I came up with was, "How do we say thank you when people trigger us?" And I'm going to do that podcast later today or tomorrow, because that's been sitting with me. How do we actually shift our process from the soul space out of the ego space and look at people's pain, their attitudes, how they treat us, how they react to us, how we react to them, as our own pain? Matt Kahn, who also talks a lot about core wounds, says that that's what we're always operating from. When someone comes up and they trigger us, it's because it's our core wound that they're triggering. And whatever they're upset about is their core wound. And so I just want us to look at that. If we're looking at our life and we're facing a lot of fears, pain, our families, our jobs, and all of this from a place of ego, we're going to see a lot of things like, "I never, blah, blah, blah. I always, blah, blah. This always happens to me. So-and-so always does this." We're going to always be looking for these absolutes in our life because we're in a space of feeling like I'm the victim, the things are happening to me. But when we switch to the soul's perspective, how do we know the difference? Who's got an idea? What looks different in your life when you're in your soul's perspective instead of your ego? Steve?
It feels loving.
Loving, right. Yeah, definitely. What else?
More compassion.
More compassion, definitely. What else? There's more out there.
Is this what I'm presenting?
It's good.
What am I creating?
What am I creating? Beautiful. I love this. When we're more internally focused, more of our statements, more of our feelings, everything is our own ownership. We're owning where we are. We're able to say, even if we get into an argument with someone, we're able to say, "Wow, I was really triggered. This triggered such and such pain from when I was 7, and I put that on you, and it wasn't your fault." But when we're in that ego place, we're just like, "You did this to me." I mean, we're great at this. We're great at both sides of it. Sometimes we do the ego thing, like, "You just did this whole thing to me," and blah, blah. And then 10 minutes later, we're like, "Oh my God, that was like my mom did this thing when I was 7, and it really triggered me." And we're always so great about coming back and owning that and saying, "I'm really sorry, that wasn't on you. And I put that on you." But how often do we come back? How often, we can't come back when it's the guy who cuts us off in traffic and we're flipping him off out the window and yelling. We can't come back to that person. We probably don't even know them. So we're putting that energy out into the world. We're putting that out onto them. Even though we're probably not even mad about them cutting us off in traffic, there's probably something else going on underneath us. I found a little quote that's the tiniest little writing. My friend got me this print and I put it up in my office, and I was sitting yesterday working on my sermon and I looked up at it and I was like, I have glasses to read that thing. The font's literally like this big, and it said, "You are what you believe yourself to be." And I was like, oh, that's a good one. I'm writing that right in here. So like I said, when we see ourselves as the victim, we are what we see ourselves to be. But when we see ourselves as God, as divinity, as the light, when we're responsible for that energy that we bring out into the world, we are that. That's what we become. That's what other people see us as. So we have the choice in that. We have all the control in it. No one else has any effect on how we are unless we let them. And that's all an ego-based thing anyways, because if we're convinced, well, so-and-so did this to me, so that's why I acted that way. I can't tell you the number of times I've said that I've said that to Doris. Like, well, you were mean to me, so I behaved poorly. Are we 7? Like, that's something you say to your mom, that like, well, you didn't let me have those cheese crackers after school, so I didn't clean my room. That's not who we are. That's our ego talking. That's our ego kind of trying to barb and prick at someone else so that we feel better. And so that we don't feel whatever it is that's actually going on inside of us. Because I think that's what we're most afraid of, is actually sitting down and feeling what's happening inside of us. Sitting in the silence, sitting in the pain, sitting in the discomfort, sitting in the joy even. Sometimes we get so caught up in what we're doing and the busyness of all the things that we're doing, we don't even take time to enjoy the joy, to smell the roses, as they say. So I think that's a big thing that we need to look at. So I think it's in 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, one of my friends owns one of the veterinarians in town, and she said, hey, can you come and talk to my whole staff, at 7 a.m. before work one day. We're doing like a meeting thing, and I want you to talk about passion and creativity, like all this thing. I'm sure, I can totally do that. So I've been sitting thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, let's talk about what's your passion, where do you find, working at a veterinarian is hard. Like, I was in a vet the other day picking up pills for our dog, and there was an emergency. I'm crying at the counter. I don't even know this lady. And the girls are like, it gets better, it's okay, we do really well. But I'm so stressed, and it's not even my animal. So I'm thinking about, okay, what do I want to talk about? And I realized I'm going to bring my 13-year-old pug as a prop. So he's this little chubby, waddly 13-year-old pug. Some of you know him. And I was like, I'm going to bring him, and I'll let him walk around, and he'll be my example. So my example is this, and I wanted to share it with you guys too. We have to find the thing in our life that makes us passionate, that drives us, that we just have to do, that we love so much, that if we were practically on our deathbed, we'd get up and go do it because we love it that much. So it's not the pug's job, which is to nap. That's his job. It's not his hobby, which is following me from all ends of the house to all other ends of the house. His passion and his drive is food. Now I say this seriously, and Candy can understand this, and she can say this is so true. He can be barely moving, okay, I'll go outside, and as soon as he knows he's done his business and he's gonna get a treat, he will sprint. And I'm talking a full run with the younger dogs, back to the house, up the driveway, in the door, and he's waiting. But 10 minutes ago, he literally could, I'm practically carrying him up the street so he can go out and do his business because he's so decrepit and can't even walk. But he's so passionate about food, which the vet says is a good thing because he's not going anywhere. He's ready to stick around for 5-10 more years at this point if there's food involved. But what I want us to look at that is for ourselves. Like, not all of us are passionate about our jobs. Some of us have jobs that are just our daytime, day life, we have to do these things. Some of us have hobbies that we love and enjoy. But what is your passion? What drives you? What would you talk about to your friend for 2 hours? What would you just talk to a stranger about, and just because you had to passionately get that out and tell them? That's the thing that I think is in that soul perspective, because when we're in our ego perspective, we're not even looking at what we're passionate about, what we're driving. We're still blaming the lady over the white carpet and the mess that we made. But when we're in our soul perspective, that's when we have the opportunity to really say, what am I here to do? What are we here to do? Are we here to just go to jobs Monday through Friday and just repeat it again and have to say, I can't wait till Friday? Are we here to do that? Is that our whole purpose in this world? I hope not. I hope not, for my own sake. And I hope not for all of our sakes. So I love this quote that I think fits this perfectly. It's by Martha Graham. She says, "There is a vitality and a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of this time, and this expression is unique, if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium and be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, nor how it compares with other expressions. It is your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, and to keep the channel open." That was just spectacular for me to hear, because how often do we compare ourselves oh, I can't do that as good as so-and-so does it. Even for myself, I had that this week. I've noticed that the Sunday, Monday before I speak, and some of these are booked out months in advance, so I know that they're coming, but the Sunday, Monday before I speak, I always have a total ego freak out. It's happened literally for the last 4 or 5 months. Something crazy happens, I get into a fight with someone, or I get into a fight with Doris, or I get into an internal ego battle, and I have this total ego breakdown of I have to get my stuff together. I have a sermon to write. I have 5 days. And I have this oh my God, what am I gonna do? And then all of a sudden, I work out whatever the thing is that came up in my ego, and all of a sudden, all that energy clears and dissipates. And then I'm oh, I did the work, and then all of a sudden, the sermon just comes. And so I think it's interesting, because I think that's what's inside of us when we're worried in that ego place, I'm going to compare myself. Here I am talking about Brene Brown, who's this amazing researcher and speaker and writer and author that I dream to be even a fraction of what she is and does. But it's not good if I compare myself and I say oh, I could never be as funny or as good or have as great or answers or research, or she does it all off the cuff, and just all this stuff. The comparison kills our creativity. It kills our passion. It kills the actual thing that we are out delivering to the world. So what ways can we do that differently ourselves? And just say, okay, the gift I have to give is X. We all have to determine what that is for ourselves. And then we just have to determine some way to give that back. And we have to stop diminishing, oh, that's not big enough. No one will see it. 5 people will watch this on YouTube. I will, sell 1 item at the art gallery. Someone will only download 1 of my songs. We have to stop that comparison of somehow we need all these likes or views or things from this external world out there so that makes us feel validated and seen. If we choose to just be seen and validated, like Raymond says, because we are God incarnate, and God is acting in us and through us, who else do we need validation from? And if we can't give it to ourselves, no amount of validation from anyone else will ever fill us up. It won't from our parents, from our kids, from our bosses, from whoever we admire. It will never be enough, and it will never fill us up. Swami Vivekananda says, if you feel like Christ, you will be a Christ. If you feel like the Buddha, you will be a Buddha. It is feeling that is the life, the strength, and the vitality, without which no amount of intellectual activity can reach God. Everything is about our feelings, where we are, how we're feeling them, how we're observing them, and then what we're putting out into the world. If we all took a moment to be more aware of where we are, what pain is inside us, what things still need healing, we wouldn't be so quick to look to judge the person cutting us off in traffic, or to judge the poor woman with the white carpet. It's not her fault. So I want to leave us with all of that. What ways can we be more aware of our own feelings, of our own hearts? Taking the pressure off of the people around us to be responsible to somehow act a certain way so that we feel okay. So that we feel validated, we feel whole, and we feel okay. That's our work. That's our job. It's not anyone else's job. And I know for me, I want to be more like James Dean the Pug, not so much about food, but I'd like to find more of my own drive in my own passion, which is this, which is standing up here on a Sunday morning or on a Thursday night in a small group or on Facebook Live or wherever it is that people are gathering to hear me speak, because I know this is what my gift is. I know this is what I'm here for. And the more I can just tap into that and drive through that and let go of comparisons and ego and just be in my heart space, the more I actually connect with all of you and share something with you that you can take home that affects you, that you can affect someone else, and that they can affect someone else, and that they can affect someone else. Because isn't that better than me flipping the guy off in traffic who then goes to his office and yells at his employees, who then yell at their kids when they get home, who then go to bed pissed off and start the whole next day doing the same thing over again? Just because of the energy we put out. That's how we affect people in our lives. So what will you choose? The ego's path of victimhood, blame, attack, always and never, or the soul's path of love, acceptance, wholeness, kindness, compassion. And so it is. Let's close our eyes just one more time for a moment. Having gratitude for this space and this place, for all of the whole community that is a part of this place, those who are here with us today, those who are not. May we carry all of this out into the world and be a beacon of light as we choose the energy that we are responsible for and that we emit out into the world.